Derby 150 is almost upon us, and of course, the best way to play the Derby and all the races is to play through NYRA Bets. Head on over to NYRABets.com if you're not a member. Use the promo code Derby25. We'll have that $200 sign-up bonus. Also, a free $25 bet on the Kentucky Derby if you play through NYRA Bets and you sign up this weekend, Derby 150. Well, the conversation about Derby 150 has to center around Fierceness, because I don't think it's any real argument that Fierceness isn't the best horse in this race if he's able to run his best race, as evidenced by his Breeders' Cup and this dominating performance in the Florida Derby. When the good Fierceness shows up, the good Fierceness is simply too fast for the horses he's running against. So what would be the reasons you might play against him? Because he is the best horse in the race, I'm not going to find any good argument against that. The problem is when things haven't gone his own way, he's run pretty badly in those races. 3 terrific performances, 2 subpar efforts. Getting bumped around a little bit, something can always happen in the Kentucky Derby. Now, I think he drew very well getting post 17. Being outside of the other speeds help him. But we don't know that he's necessarily going to be comfortable stalking or sitting off of a very, very fast pace. And it does seem like there should be pace in this race. I don't see him clearing from out there, and I don't see the pace being particularly easy. So there's a couple of things going against him. If he gets some trouble at the start of the race, something can easily happen, especially in the Derby. And if the pace gets too hot, I think he's against it. So while I think he's the best horse in the race, as the favorite, he's vulnerable in this race, and I'd prefer to play other horses. But I'm not going to be surprised when Fierceness wins the Kentucky Derby, and I lose my bets. Let's move on to the horse that's going to be the second choice in the Bluegrass Stakes, and that was Sierra Leone, who beat Just a Touch and Dornoch that day. Sierra Leone is listed as very close to being the favorite, and just about everyone you talk to seems to think he's one of the horses to beat in here. He's a deep, deep closer. He's kind of the opposite of a horse like Fierceness and an opposite of another horse that comes out of this race, Dornoch, and really Just a Touch as well, and we'll get to them. I don't have a knock on Sierra Leone. He's run well in all of his races. He was the only horse that made up ground in this race, but he also got a very fast pace to close into. But he's supposed to get a pretty quick pace in this Kentucky Derby as well. He is a deep closer. He's going to come from as far back. He could be 20th early in this race. Now, that's not to say that a horse can't win from that far back. And clearly, he's run well enough and fast enough that he can do that. But do you really want to take a super short price on a horse that doesn't have a decided edge in speed figures and is going to be coming from way, way back? I don't. Do I think he's one of the main players? I absolutely do. But he's not my top horse in this race, but he is a horse I will absolutely be using. Just a Touch. I think there's an argument that Just a Touch could turn out to be as good as anyone in this field, save perhaps Fierceness under ideal circumstances. The problem I have with Just a Touch is very much the same problem I had with Mage last year. I think there is a valid argument that he ran a better race than Sierra Leone did in the Bluegrass because he was the one that was on top of that very quick pace, and yet he still finished second. Pace figures make him sort of the better participant in that race. I know Mage won last year behind the 8-ball. Now, Mage had run the best race, in my opinion, the Florida Derby, and I didn't use him prominently because I just felt like he was always sort of one race behind, and those kind of horses often don't run their race in the Kentucky Derby. It didn't work last year, but that doesn't mean that that's necessarily flawed reasoning. And for that reason, while I think that Just a Touch is a player in here, I think he's part of a quick pace, and I just worry a little bit that pace and the fact that he's only had those 3 starts and he's being rushed along a little bit to get Derby might catch up to him in Derby 150. I do think Just a Touch, though, at the end of the day, is going to be one of the best horses out of this division. As far as Dornoch, well, he's got the rail. I don't worry that much about it, especially because they have just the one gate now. And he may be the speed of the speed, and they're going to rush him out. Now, some are going to say he survived a fast pace in the Remsen, and he beat Sierra Leone, and that would be accurate. The problem is he rode a gold rail that day, and his races as a 3-year-old have not been particularly good. He beat a dramatically subpar field in the Fountain of Youth with a slow figure, and I thought he did absolutely no running whatsoever in the Bluegrass Stakes. So he's going to come busting out from post 1. He's going to deal with other speeds like Just a Touch, Fierceness, as well perhaps as some others, and he's going to hold them all off. He's not doing it with my money. I'm not a Dornoch fan. He's a big price if you like him. Sierra Leone, though, probably going to be the second choice in this Kentucky Derby. Let's go to Louisiana and see the 1 3/16 Louisiana Derby, the farthest prep that we saw for this Derby. And this is a race that's getting a lot of attention. Now, Track Phantom, who finished 4th in here, he's going to be part of the pace, and he's not an untalented horse. Whether or not he's good enough to win remains to be seen. Catching Freedom got it done, making the final move in a race that kind of collapsed. I don't have a knock on Catching Freedom. He's going to get a lot of pace to run into, and I think that makes him dangerous in here. He has a little more speed than horses like Honor Marie and Sierra Leone, so maybe he moves before them. Do you want a horse making the last move or making that earlier move? In this race, you wanted the last mover. I actually thought Honor Marie may have run as well, if not better, because he was wider. While Catching Freedom was saving ground, he was 2 to 3 wide at different points in the races on the turn, and he also made an earlier move, which may have caught up to him. Now, maybe they want to be more patient in this Kentucky Derby. And originally, I was going to pick Honor Marie on top in this race. I thought he was kind of a buried horse a little bit. He, in my opinion, may have run better than Catching Freedom and would be a much bigger price. Subsequently, I see that a lot of people are liking him, and I don't have a problem with that. A lot of people are going to like a lot of horses in the Derby. The problem is I think his price isn't going to be as good as I thought it might be once. And in this Derby, I want a big price, so he's going to be prominent in my picks, but he's not my top pick. Forever Young. Forever Young is another horse that might be one of the best horses in this race. And his win over in Dubai was a very good one, as was his win in Saudi Arabia. I don't really have a knock on him as a horse. It's hard to get a great feeling for who he is. We don't know his competition in these races as well as we know some of the horses that have been racing over in the U.S. The problem I have with him is this is a move that just hasn't worked. And it's not that it hasn't worked. It's blown up badly. Prepping over in Dubai and running 5 weeks later in the Kentucky Derby in a big, huge field against much tougher competition has proven disastrous for the horses that have tried it before Forever Young. The argument that, well, he's not as forward a horse as some of the others, maybe that's a valid one. This talk about him not liking kickback, I don't worry about that much. I think the kickback in Dubai is a bigger factor than it's going to be in Churchill Downs. He drew well towards the outside. I'm just not likely to take a horse coming from Dubai to win this race. I think if you're trying to win the Kentucky Derby, you probably want to find a route that's been successful in the past. Look, maybe somebody will do it, and they'll win the Kentucky Derby prepping over in Dubai. That horse is going to beat me, and if it's Forever Young this year, he's going to beat me. As far as the preps in the Wood Memorial, believe me, there is nothing I would like more than to see Resilience win this Kentucky Derby and have people stop knocking my hometown race, the Wood Memorial. And I think Resilience is a really nice horse. Having said that, I don't think he's quite ready to win this Derby. First of all, he got an absolute dream trip, breaking from the perfect post, being in position. The fact that the favorite, Deterministic, did no running in here, it just sort of dropped the race in his lap. And it wasn't fast enough to win here. And when a horse like Society Man, who maybe he's an improving, lightly raced horse, runs second, I just downgrade the race a little bit. I'd love to be wrong about it and see the Wood Memorial as the prep that wins the Derby. I just don't think it's going to happen here. I like Resilience, and I like the fact that he's got a trainer in Bill Mottos. Horses keep getting better and better, but whether or not he's going to be better enough to be competitive in this Derby remains to be seen. Let's go out to Santa Anita. I am not a West Coast hater. I love the California horses, and all things considered, I wish they had a top-notch horse this year. I just don't think they do. As we look at Stronghold, I just don't think he's good enough. You're taking a horse that is coming out of an absolutely perfect trip, and he got an 89 buyer, splitting horses. I mean, everything went perfectly for him, and he ran a figure that's not good enough to win. Now, at the end of the day, you're going to say, well, Andy, you're picking a horse in this race that's running figures not fast enough to win, and I think that's a fair argument. But I think there are arguments that horses' figures could get better. And listen, he may get better, but he's not getting a better trip. And he's got to get a lot faster to be competitive in here. So let's get to my slow horse that I'm taking on top in this race, and that's Domestic Product. I was originally going to pick him second to Honor Marie, but I just kind of thought that his price would be so much better than Honor Marie that maybe I wouldn't mind taking him on top. Now, how am I going to get a horse home that is running buyer figures of 87 and 82 this year leading up to the Derby? And I can understand the argument that I'm a little biased, and I'm trying to get a horse that's too slow to win the race. And there's some validity to those arguments. The thing is, in playing the horses, whether it's the Kentucky Derby or a $10,000 maiden claiming race, you're looking for buried horses. You're looking for horses that are not fully exposed, that are better than they look on paper. And there is a very substantial argument that Domestic Product is a much better horse than he looks on paper. Look at the two races he's coming out of. 25 and 25 and 1, 50 and 2/5 and 51, 114 and 1 and 116 and 1, the fractional times. He is coming out of 2 dirt races that were basically run like distance turf races with slow paces where they have to run at the end. The problem is they can accelerate in the turf in those situations, and they can't do the same thing on the dirt. So the fact that he was still able to close a little bit into those ridiculously slow paces is a feather in his cap, and I think there is an argument that you could say those races could easily have been 10 points faster if the paces had been faster. And if that was the case, he would be more of a factor in here, and he'd be 10 points lower in the odds. He's been training extremely well with his stablemate Sierra Leone, and I just think Domestic Product is the one horse that I can make a case is underexposed in this Kentucky Derby. His price will be right, so I don't mind taking him on top. Let's get to some other horses in here, including Endlessly in West Saratoga coming out of the Jeff Ruby Stakes. When a trainer like Michael McCarthy, who in my opinion is one of the better trainers in the game, is adamant that they shouldn't be running on the dirt, that this horse that qualified for the Derby with an impressive win in the Jeff Ruby Stakes on synthetic should be running in a much lower race, but still a big race, the American Turf at Churchill Downs, and the owners make a decision to run, I'm not betting that horse. He's a really good horse. I look forward to seeing him in the Belmont Derby and the Saratoga Derby, and I think we're going to see some good performances from him. But I don't believe that he's a dirt horse, and I don't believe we're going to see a good effort. Now, West Saratoga, who I don't think is good enough to win, he ran terrific. He may have got a little lucky that a horse behind him had some trouble in the race, but West Saratoga actually ran really well in the Jeff Ruby Stakes. I just don't think he's good enough to win this Kentucky Derby. The one prep we haven't gotten to yet is at Oaklawn. Part of that is because Muth, who won it, won't be allowed to participate in this year's Kentucky Derby. Just Steel is terrific. If you don't like Just Steel, you just haven't been paying attention. This is a horse that we always thought might have some distance limitations, and it seems like distance is not a problem. And you always kind of like seeing Wayne Lucas involved in these races, and he just keeps chugging along. He did not have the best of trips in this race, and he ran terrifically. The only race he's run poorly in recently was in the Rebel when he came back 3 weeks after the delayed Southwest. So I'll give him a pass for that race, and his effort here makes him the kind of long shot that I can understand why people are using, and he will be somewhere on my tickets. As far as Mystic Dan, who finished third in there. Mystic Dan had this huge effort in the Southwest. The problem was it wasn't dressed up by a wet track. It was dressed up by being on a super gold rail, and that's what exaggerated his performance. Now, his 101 buyer there is the fastest fig these horses have run outside of Fierceness. So if you want to bet him off that number, be my guest. He'll be a big price. That race gave him a shot, but he rode a bias that day. Now, he may have the right kind of running style with a race that should have a quick pace, but his race in the Arkansas Derby was so subpar that I just can't use him. I can understand he'll have some fans, and maybe I'll be wrong about him, but based on his Arkansas Derby, I just don't think he's good enough to win this Kentucky Derby. So where am I going here? Well, I tip my hand. Domestic Product, the 15 on top. The number 2, Honor Marie, is my second choice. The number 7, it's the wrong way, guys. It's actually, don't worry about it. It's the number 7. Number 7, Honor Marie, is second. The number 2, Sierra Leone, is third. And the 17, Fierceness. You'll get it right. I like Domestic Product over Honor Marie, Sierra Leone, and Fierceness in Derby 150, which I know you'll be playing it through NYRA Bets. If you're not a member, head on over to NYRA Bets. Use the promo code DERBY25, and we will match the $200 of your initial deposit and give you a free $25 Derby bet.